Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for the segment, we have Bill Li, Chairman and CEO of Knightscope, as well as Cameron Chell, President and CEO of Draganfly. They join me to discuss how AI, robotics, and drones are being used to fight crime. It is great to have you both with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. And Bill, I'm going to kick it off with you, then go to Cam. Explain to us where you sit within the AI and robotics industry.
Well, greetings from Silicon Valley. Thanks for having us. We're right in the heart of Silicon Valley in Mountain View, and we've been building now for a decade plus autonomous security robots, which are a very unique combination of autonomy, AI, robotics, and electric vehicle technology. And the idea is to provide officers and guards with really smart eyes, ears, and voice on the ground in multiple locations at the same time so they can do their jobs much, much more effectively. Knightscope is a practical application of AI in the real world, generating millions of dollars of revenue, and have now operated literally close to 3 million hours out in the real world.
And Cam, where does Draganfly sit within the ecosystem?
Sounds great. Thanks for having us today. So Draganfly is a 25-year-old commercial drone manufacturer, commonly known as the oldest drone manufacturer in the world. We've been working in the public safety space for that entire 25 years, as well as many other industries. And we've been using machine learning and particularly AI for about 7 years now. Nothing collects data better than a drone. So the data sets that we have that can inform AI are incredibly rich. And so in particular, as it relates to information, data, and decision matrix in the public safety sector, and working in particular with Knightscope, it's incredibly valuable and a differentiator and a game changer for what's going to happen in public safety.
So add more context around this for the audience. How does Draganfly work together? How do you guys work with each other?
Bill, do you want to start that?
Sure. For a decade plus, we've had our investors and supporters asking us, hey, when are you going to put drones to combine with robots that are, unmanned ground vehicles, basically, so you'd have some aerial reconnaissance available when needed. So think of in the future kind of a concept of operations. One of our machines heard a gunshot, detected a license plate that was of interest. Let's get the drone up in the air now so that we have an immediate aerial reconnaissance and live footage. One of the reasons we started Knightscope back in 2013 was after Sandy Hook. And if you look at some of the dates or times, how long it takes a human to actually call 911, it's 6, 9, 12 minutes. And when they call 911, all they have is shots fired and a location. You literally walking in blind into a situation. And I think with Draganfly and Knightscope partnering up, we can start addressing that issue of really important data that Cam just spoke of.
Right. So, Bill, how will AI and large language models impact robotics and drones? I mean, you just gave the perfect example of how we can conceptualize this from the human perspective. But what about when you start incorporating AI and large language models?
So that's one of the funny things we've always been asked, like, when's Knightscope going to use AI? And I'm thinking, do you think the robots are kind of just moving along by themselves? There's no Fred Flintstone or Barney Rubble in there pedaling. And so we've been using AI for the longest of time, since inception, before all this craziness around AI. But now it's the beginning of, I think, our next growth phase, where AI enables the really key aspect of getting these machines to be able to see, feel, hear, smell, speak, and cooperate autonomously. And large language models are really interesting and are a facet of it. The real breakthrough that a lot of us are working through and anxious for the industry to get through is around visual context, because text can only provide a certain amount of context that's really helpful for accounting and legal matters where you have constrained conditions in terms of, alphabet and words and the like. A visual scene is really difficult, but it has a massive amount of very rich information. I think combining all that's going to be a fascinating next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. And Cam, Bill brings up a great point that using AI, it's not something new to either one of your companies or multiple industries for that matter. So I want you to expand upon what Bill had just said. And then do you think we're heading towards an AI bubble, or are we still in early innings?
Oh, I don't think I still think we're in the warm up. It might be the first inning, maybe. It still might even be pregame. In terms of, specific con ops as it relates to this type of a scenario, using a large language model is really being able to do things like interpret the chatter between the off or managing, scenario where that's unfolding at that time. And so you'll be able to use multiple drones, multiple automated robots who are then responding based on actually what's happening in real time, interpreting the visual data, and then moving to, say, open windows or to cover surveillance on a back door or whatever the case may be. And that can all be happening long before officers even get present to a scenario like a hand standy hook or something like that. But it even extends further into the sensors that are on this equipment now. So during COVID, and Bill and Knightscope were involved with this, we actually, using AI, developed the camera sensors on our equipment to be able to read vital signs. So we'll be able to take stress levels, heart rate monitor, blood oxygen levels, all that type of stuff of either, victims on the ground or perpetrators on the ground or people of interest on the ground in many cases. And so we've seen public safety aspects of this, military aspects of it. And so just the amount of information and the decision matrix that's going to be enabled here over just the very short coming year or two is going to be just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Is there a way to quantify the success of the projects where you have implemented this technology, or is it still too early? How is it changing decisions and strategies within the company's law enforcement agencies that leverage your technologies?
I think for Knightscope, the most fascinating thing was the technology actually worked. This is a groundbreaking set of new capabilities, and everyone's like, yeah, there's no way this is ever going to work. If you go to knightscope.com/crime, you get a nice long list of all the positive things that these robots have been able to do. And despite the great talking point of the robots are coming, they're going to kill everybody and take everyone's job, the fact of the matter is that that's not the case. These are really innovative new tools and that have helped law enforcement agencies and security guards apprehend armed gunmen, stop fraudulent insurance, deal with domestic abuse cases, and we're just getting started. And I agree with Cam, we're like literally barely in the first inning, and that's why the next 10 years are going to be extremely fascinating.
Yeah, I would agree with Bill in that. So all the way back in 2013, as an example, Draganfly drone was credited via federal police force to be the first drone that actually saved a human life. And today that drone sits on permanent display in the Smithsonian. And so when you start to think about how you quantify these things and start looking at this very quickly emerging drone as a first responder or automated robot as a first responder space, it enables you to get information, people to location much quicker, much less expensive. It may be a false alarm. Our stats have shown that 20% of the time it's a false alarm. So you're not deploying those resources where they shouldn't be or don't need to be at that time. So from an ROI perspective, it's very easy to quantify.
I think back to the bubble question, I really don't think we are. I live here in Silicon Valley. I was here during the .com madness in the 2000 time frame, and I think two big changes have occurred. One may be less obvious than the other, and part of it is just the much better discipline that the funding sources that provided the startups, and they're just not writing checks for whatever silly idea there might be. There's a lot more discipline and a lot more entrepreneurs being a lot more thoughtful in getting something that's a proof of concept or a prototype or something much more easy to assess than just a PowerPoint presentation. So I think the discipline around the capital going out, but the other thing that's maybe less obvious is now, I believe it's about a quarter, maybe clearing him to a third, is the amount of corporate venture capital and the amount of corporations that have set up permanent shop in Silicon Valley, and that's a fixed basis that's not going away. So I think the combination of some capital discipline, some permanent capital in place, plus the promise and the actual results thus far of AI, I think we're finally past the AI winters. we might be in a self-driving or autonomy winter, but things are looking up.
Well, Bill, it's a great point that you make, and I think it's one of the silver linings that we saw in the valuation reset from, the 2020 and 2021 rush to market. We're seeing private market valuations reset and putting an emphasis on balance sheet and governance and, proof of concept and proven revenue streams and so forth. And I think that's healthy for the industry overall. But when you think about the fear that sometimes instilled that we're going to have robots and drones all over the place, I mean, it just makes perfect sense. I can't even imagine being in the position of law enforcement where you get a call and you don't know what the next 5 to 10 minutes might be like when you arrive at the scene. Meanwhile, you can get all this information and data from a robot where, it doesn't have the emotional impulses or fear within it. It just seems like, especially in today's day and age, that I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, that's too much of a blanket, but I just think, from the safety perspective of law enforcement as an example, why wouldn't you leverage robots, as part of your job?
Anything to keep an officer out of harm's way is going to be supportive. And I think one of the important things is for us to continue to deliver crime-fighting wins so society can better understand that this technology is here to help and make a positive impact. And, we have to overcome a little bit of the 30 years of Hollywood putting out all kinds of dystopian content. And but at the same time, robots, and we've seen it all around the country, it brings the kid out of almost everyone once you have an interaction face to face, as opposed to getting PowerPointed or Zoomed to death. I think once they have the interaction, and as these continue to grow across the country, it'll be one day where it's like, what? You don't have an autonomous security robot and you don't have an autonomous security drone? Like, what's wrong with you? And the robots are coming, and anyone who thinks that that's not the case is up for a rude autonomous awakening.
And Cam?
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with Bill. Like, to speak to Bill's earlier question as to maybe a number of his shareholders or people in the industry have said, why haven't drones been incorporated into the platform that he's building or that type of thing sooner into public safety autonomously. And drones and robots have been in public safety for quite some time, just not completely autonomously. And as it relates to drones, a lot of that's been due to regulation. People, you need to understand these are aircraft that are in the air that need to make sure they don't fall on people. They need to interact with it within the airspace of other very complex set of logistics and sets of other devices that are flying around and moving and stuff. And so it's taken a while for the regulatory environment, to catch up to where the technology is, and it is finally there. But you also kind of get the sense that even over the there might be a societal type of some aversion to robots at this point, or to drones, because they are such a domineering presence, which is also what makes them so effective in public safety. If you put a drone up in the air, you put you put a robot in the presence of a perpetrator, it changes the entire scope of the situation that's happening at that time. Literally in the course of the next 3 or 4 years or 5 years, that's just going to be so normal, because kids who are like 15 today and 20 and in those situations, or 10 years from now in decision maker situations, they're just not going to have an expectation to operate in an environment that doesn't have this type of capability.
Right. And Bill, I want you to follow on this for a moment here, because one thing that we cover on the show in particular is the ethical use of AI and biases that are represented within AI, data in, data out. How are you responding to that? Because you can see, on the flip side of this, how this can open up the proverbial can of worms if it's not being used from an ethical perspective.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to that. This is a technical issue. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you put in garbage data into a model, you're going to get garbage out. And the emphasis is on making sure that the data being provided to the model gives you the appropriate output. And since early days, sometimes the amount of data or the quality of the data wasn't where it needed to be. But this is a technical issue. This is not there's something wrong with that algorithm or the technology itself. Back to Cam's point on the use of teleoperated unmanned ground vehicles and quadrupeds and law enforcement. I think the key thing here coming in the coming years is needing to build out what we call a AI mission control software platform to have all these autonomous machines be able to cooperate. Because imagine, let's say, fast forward, robots and drones are everywhere. There is no way that 911 dispatch or security operations center are going to be able to have hundreds, if not thousands, of drones and robots coordinate with each other and for the human to tell them what to do. There needs to be, quick and needs to be autonomous and needs to be able to cooperate. And that platform is something that we're itching to build ahead of that really important need.
Yeah, and I think I agree with Bill for the most part. Maybe speaking a bit to your question directly, there are going to be folks that are going to try to use AI for unethical reasons. It is our responsibility to ensure that we provide the environment so that that data can be collected, that we're ahead of the curve, and that we can provide the ethical construct for that AI to be assisting, as opposed to like I get a lot of these questions on the military side with our customers there, and they're like, like anybody can use this technology, and do we really want to be using drones for this type of a thing? I'm like, well, if you're not, you're going to be a victim of it. So you better be ahead of the curve on this. And I think with what's happening here, society has responded for the most part in a very positive way to when innovation comes in and dealing with the ethical issues around it. As long as we're open and transparent and we adopt it. As soon as we try to bury it or say that it's not a problem, it doesn't exist, we're gonna ban it. That's when the problems have tended to happen.
I think, Jill, it would be one thing to think about from a business model standpoint to alleviate the issue. Is a lot of companies, including ourselves, have a machine as a service, robot as a service, drone as a service, so that the technology is not out there in the ether and letting anyone or everyone just kind of have at it. Is for the company to be responsible for the hardware, the software, the AI, the ethical use of it, monitoring it 24/7, and that relieves some of the concern here.
All right, Bill, Cam, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.